In the dead of night, as the mist curled like ghostly fingers around the ancient stones of Stonehenge, 78-year-old Edgar Blackwood stumbled upon a sight that defied reason, a shimmering, pulsating craft hovering silently above the monument. With a sudden beam of light piercing the dark sky, Edgar's body felt weightless, and in that moment his mind unlocked a truth buried for millennia. What he saw next would forever alter the course of humanity. Edgar Blackwood was a man of peculiar habits. At 78, he had little patience for bustling towns or noisy pubs, preferring instead the solitude of the countryside. His home, a modest stone cottage tucked away on the Salisbury Plain, stood just a few miles from Stonehenge. Most nights Edgar would wander the fields under the cloak of darkness, his weathered walking stick in hand, as the stars overhead whispered secrets only he seemed to understand. On this particular evening, the air felt different. A thick mist clung to the ground, swirling around the ancient stones in a way that seemed almost deliberate. Edgar's boots crunched against the frost-kissed grass as he approached Stonehenge, his lantern casting a dim, flickering light across the monument's towering silhouette. The world was quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves in the breeze. But Edgar couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The stones had always fascinated him. As a retired historian, Edgar had spent decades piecing together the puzzle of humanity's past, and yet Stonehenge remained an enigma. Who had built it? Why? The questions lingered, unanswered, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Tonight, however, something about the monument felt alive. The air around it seemed charged, as if the stones themselves were humming with anticipation. He reached out, his gnarled fingers brushing against the cold, weathered surface of one of the monoliths. The moment he made contact, a shiver ran down his spine. The stone vibrated faintly under his touch, a sensation he had never experienced before. "Must be my imagination," he muttered, though his voice carried little conviction. Then he heard it, a low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Edgar froze, his breath caught in his throat. The sound grew louder, deeper, reverberating through his very bones. He turned his gaze skyward, searching for the source. At first there was nothing, just an expanse of stars twinkling against the inky blackness. But then he saw it. A faint light appeared on the horizon, growing steadily brighter as it approached. It moved with an unnatural grace, gliding silently through the night sky. Edgar's heart pounded as the object came into view. A metallic, saucer-shaped craft, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly iridescence. It hovered above Stonehenge, bathing the ancient stones in a soft, ethereal glow. For a moment, Edgar could do nothing but stare, his mind grappling with the impossibility of what he was witnessing. This was no aircraft, no drone, no trick of the light. This was something else, something far beyond his understanding. The hum intensified, and a beam of light shot down from the craft, illuminating the center of the stone circle. Edgar staggered back, shielding his eyes from the brilliance. When he dared to look again, he saw figures, tall, humanoid silhouettes descending within the beam of light. They moved with an elegance that was both mesmerizing and unnerving, their forms cloaked in a translucent material that seemed to shimmer like liquid mercury. Edgar's breath hitched as the realization struck him. These were not humans. The figures stepped onto the ground, their presence commanding yet oddly serene. One of them turned its gaze to Edgar, its eyes glowing with a kaleidoscope of colors. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming flood of emotion, curiosity, fear, awe, all at once. The being raised a hand, and Edgar felt a strange warmth envelop him, as if he were being cradled by an invisible force. "Do not fear," a voice echoed in his mind. It was not spoken, but telepathic, resonating directly within his consciousness. "You are not chosen, but you are here. Observe." Before Edgar could react, the beam of light expanded, enveloping both him and the stones. The world around him dissolved into a cascade of colors and shapes, as if reality itself were being unraveled. He was weightless, floating in a sea of light and sound, his mind flooded with images he couldn't comprehend. Vast star fields, alien landscapes, structures that defied the laws of physics. When the light receded, Edgar found himself standing once again in the circle of stones. The craft was gone, the figures vanished, and the hum had fallen silent. But the air still crackled with an unearthly energy, and in his hand, Edgar clutched something he had not held before. A smooth black tablet etched with symbols that seemed to shift and shimmer in the dim light. His heart raced as he stared at the artifact, his mind buzzing with questions. What had he just witnessed? Who, or what, had he encountered? And what was the purpose of the object now in his possession? As Edgar backed away from the stones, the mist appeared alive, spiraling in patterns mimicking the symbols on the tablet. Whispers echoed faintly, as though the air around Stonehenge held its own consciousness. Clutching the tablet, he fled, glancing back once to see the stones bathed in a faint, lingering glow. Edgar knew his life, and perhaps humanity's, had just irrevocably changed. Edgar Blackwood spent the rest of the night in a haze of unease and awe, seated in the dim light of his cottage's fireplace. The black tablet lay on the table before him, its symbols shifting subtly, like tiny streams of light flowing over its surface. It didn't feel like an object at all, more like something alive. The whispers he'd heard at Stonehenge lingered, faint and elusive, as though they were coming from the tablet itself. They were not words, not exactly, but emotions, impressions. He wanted to touch it, to hold it longer, but something primal deep within him held him back. This was no relic from human hands. It radiated something alien, something incomprehensible. He could almost feel it watching him. By morning, Edgar could no longer resist its pull. With trembling fingers, he reached out, and as his skin brushed the surface, a jolt shot through his entire body. The room seemed to dissolve around him as his vision blurred. He found himself standing in the middle of vast star fields, surrounded by infinite galaxies. Great alien cities loomed in the distance, spires glowing under unfamiliar twin suns. One planet burned with eerie light, its surface marked with strange, concentric patterns. These images faded as quickly as they had come, leaving Edgar gasping, his heart pounding. Whatever this artifact was, it wasn't meant for someone like him, or perhaps it was meant only for someone like him. Edgar had studied ancient relics for most of his life, but nothing had ever hinted at something like this. It felt personal, yet utterly cosmic. His head spun with questions. Who had created it, and why? One thing was clear. He couldn't solve this alone. He needed someone who could understand the deeper nature of this mystery, someone with knowledge beyond his expertise. His thoughts immediately turned to Dr. Eleanor Vance, a trusted colleague and friend. She was an astrophysicist and one of the few who had entertained his theories about the hidden connections between ancient monuments and celestial patterns. If anyone could help, it was her. Later that day, Edgar made the long journey to Cambridge, the black tablet carefully packed away in his satchel. Eleanor greeted him with visible concern, her sharp eyes narrowing at his pale and disheveled state. "Edgar, you look like you've been in a fight with the cosmos," she said, half joking. "I think I have," Edgar replied, producing the tablet from his bag and setting it on her desk. "This found me." Eleanor's curiosity turned to focused attention as she studied the object. The shifting symbols immediately caught her interest. "What am I looking at?" she asked, leaning closer. "A message, or maybe a key? I don't know yet," Edgar replied. He described the events at Stonehenge, the glowing craft, the beings, the moment the tablet appeared in his hands. Eleanor listened intently, her skepticism dissolving as he spoke. "This isn't any language I've seen," she said, tracing the surface of the tablet. "But it's not random either. These symbols, they're moving in patterns. It's almost mathematical." She paused, her expression thoughtful. "Where did they say this was from?" "They didn't. They just said to observe," Edgar replied. Over the next few days, Eleanor and her small team worked tirelessly to study the artifact. Despite their advanced equipment, the symbols defied translation. The tablet emitted a faint electromagnetic field, almost like it was alive. It wasn't until Eleanor noticed the patterns aligning with star constellations that they made their first breakthrough. She cross-referenced the movements of the symbols with astronomical charts and discovered they pointed to a location, a remote set of coordinates deep in the Scottish Highlands. Eleanor shared the findings with Edgar, who stared at the map with a mixture of fear and recognition. "It's a vault," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stonehenge wasn't just a monument. It was a marker. This tablet is the guide." Eleanor nodded. "If this is real, what's at those coordinates could change everything we know. But we have to be careful. If the wrong people find out about this—" "They won't," Edgar said firmly. "We keep this between us." The next morning, Edgar and Eleanor began their journey. The rugged highlands tested their endurance, but Edgar pressed forward, spurred on by the whispers growing louder in his mind. The coordinates led them to a remote valley shrouded in mist, where the ruins of an ancient castle stood. Beneath the ruins, they found the entrance to a cavern. The ground seemed to vibrate faintly, resonating with the same energy as the tablet. Edgar held the artifact tightly as its symbols began to glow more brightly. "This is it," he said, stepping toward the dark maw of the cavern. Eleanor hesitated. "Edgar, once we go in, there's no turning back." "There's nothing to turn back to," Edgar replied, his voice resolute. He stepped across the threshold, and the air around them seemed to ripple and bend. The whispers reached a crescendo, and a faint light emanated from deep within the cavern. Whatever lay ahead, Edgar knew, was not just a discovery. It was the beginning of something far greater than he had ever imagined. Edgar Blackwood and Dr. Eleanor Vance stood at the entrance of the cavern, the hum of the tablet filling the air. Its pulsing glow had intensified, casting faint light on smooth stone walls. The air felt thick and alive, carrying a tension neither could ignore. Before them stretched a tunnel, its walls unnaturally smooth, as though carved by something far beyond human technology. "Do you hear it?" Eleanor whispered. Edgar nodded, clutching the tablet. The whispers were no longer faint. They surrounded them, almost tangible. "It's calling us," he murmured. Flashlights revealed markings etched into the walls, symbols glowing faintly, identical to those on the tablet. Eleanor ran her fingers over one. "These match perfectly. It's as if the tablet awakened this place." "This isn't just a cave," Edgar said, his voice low. "It's a structure, a gateway." The air grew warmer, the hum louder, almost vibrating through their bones. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its scale defying explanation. The walls stretched into infinity, cascading with glowing patterns. At its center stood a pedestal, holding a larger, more intricate version of Edgar's tablet. "This can't be earthly," Eleanor said softly. Edgar felt a pull toward the pedestal, the whispers in his mind becoming a deafening crescendo. Images flooded his mind, alien worlds lit by twin suns, crystalline spires and webs of light connecting stars. He stumbled, clutching his head. "Edgar!" Eleanor steadied him. "What's happening?" "It's showing me something," he gasped. "Something I'm meant to see." With trembling hands, Edgar placed the tablet on the pedestal. The chamber came alive. A beam of light shot upward, forming a three-dimensional star map. At its center was Earth, linked by glowing lines to distant points. Eleanor stared. "It's a star map. But more. These lines, they're pathways. Wormholes, maybe." One point on the map glowed brighter than the rest. A deep voice filled the room, speaking an alien language. Though unintelligible, its meaning was clear. "The Vault of Origins," Edgar whispered. It's guiding us. Eleanor turned to him. This isn't just a discovery. It's an invitation. Whoever built this wants us to follow. Why now? Edgar asked. Before she could answer, the map shifted. The glowing point expanded, filling the chamber with an image of a massive structure floating in space. Its surface shimmered with the same alien symbols. That's where we're meant to go, Eleanor said, but it's not on Earth. The pedestal emitted another beam of light, forming a shimmering doorway. The whispers intensified, urging them forward. Edgar hesitated. Eleanor, if we go through, there's no coming back. Eleanor met his gaze. Edgar, this is what you've been searching for. We were meant to find this. Taking a deep breath, Edgar stepped through the doorway. Light enveloped him, and for a moment he floated among stars. When he emerged, he stood on an alien world. Eleanor appeared beside him, her breath catching. The landscape stretched out, a violet sky above crystalline towers and rivers of liquid light. In the distance, the structure floated, pulsing faintly. "This is the vault," Eleanor whispered. Edgar stared at it, wonder and dread mixing. The answers lay ahead, but as the whispers faded into silence, he couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Edgar Blackwood and Dr. Eleanor Vance stood frozen on the alien terrain, gazing at the massive structure before them. The vault, as the map had called it, loomed in the distance, its surface shimmering with an unearthly iridescence. Rivers of liquid light twisted around its base, feeding into the air like streams of energy. The air buzzed faintly, filled with a vibration that seemed to resonate deep within their very beings. "This feels alive," Eleanor whispered, her voice tinged with awe. Edgar nodded slowly. "It's not just a building. It's a machine, or something far more than that. It's almost like it's waiting for us." The violet sky stretched endlessly, dotted with pulsating stars that shifted subtly as they walked. Twin suns burned low on the horizon, refracting light through rivers of crystalline energy. The landscape around them was surreal and fluid, shifting in patterns that felt disorienting. At times, Edgar felt as though the ground beneath their feet was pushing them forward, as if an unseen force was urging them toward the vault. Eleanor stumbled slightly, her gaze darting nervously. "This planet, it's like it knows we're here," she muttered. "It's not just aware, it's guiding us." Edgar didn't reply. The whispers grew louder as they approached the vault. They were no longer just vague sounds. They had become fragments of language, incomprehensible yet carrying an undeniable weight. Each step seemed to unlock something buried deep within Edgar's mind, a knowledge he hadn't realized was there. The base of the vault was massive, its surface covered in intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with a rhythm that matched the hum of the planet. As they neared, a circular doorway appeared, materializing as if in response to their presence. Edgar felt the tablet in his hand grow warm. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. Eleanor hesitated, her breath quickening. "What if we're not supposed to be here? What if this isn't meant for us?" Edgar turned to her, his gaze calm but intense. "If we weren't meant to be here, we wouldn't have been allowed this far." His certainty surprised even himself. Without waiting, he stepped forward through the opening. After a moment, Eleanor followed. Inside, the air was cool and still, yet it vibrated faintly with the same hum they had felt outside. The interior stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of corridors and chambers illuminated by glowing orbs that floated overhead, casting soft light. The architecture was alien but elegant, its surfaces smooth and metallic, etched with symbols that mirrored those on the tablet. "This place is ancient," Eleanor murmured, running her hand along one of the walls. "But it doesn't look abandoned. It's alive." Edgar's attention was drawn to the center of the chamber, where a massive console stood, glowing faintly with an inner light. It was covered in the same shifting symbols as the tablet. As if guided by an unseen force, Edgar approached it and placed the tablet onto the console. The chamber responded immediately. The hum deepened into a resonant vibration, and the walls lit up with cascading patterns of light and energy. A voice filled the chamber, deep and resonant, speaking in the same alien tongue they had heard earlier. This time, however, the words felt clearer, as though they were resonating directly in their minds. "Welcome, observer," the voice intoned. "The archive awaits." Eleanor's eyes widened. "The archive? What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Edgar could respond, a beam of light shot from the console, projecting a holographic map of the galaxy into the air. This map was far more detailed than the one they had seen earlier. Countless points of light marked planets and systems, each connected by intricate pathways of glowing energy. As they watched, one of the points began to glow brighter, and the map zoomed in to reveal a planet surrounded by massive, orbiting structures. The voice spoke again, its tone solemn and deliberate. "Origins. Forgotten. Knowledge. Buried. Reclaim. The path." Eleanor stepped closer to the projection, her expression filled with awe. "Edgar, this isn't just a vault. It's a library, a repository of knowledge, and it's pointing us to something specific." Edgar felt a chill run down his spine. "That planet. It's not in our solar system. How are we supposed to get there?" As if in answer, the console shifted, revealing another hologram. This time it displayed a massive ship, sleek and angular, its design unlike anything Edgar had ever seen. The hologram rotated slowly, showcasing its intricate details. "The vessel awaits," the voice intoned once more. Eleanor turned to Edgar, her expression a mixture of awe and fear. "It's giving us a way to go. They want us to follow the map." "But why?" Edgar asked, his voice trembling. "Why us? Why now?" The voice offered no further answers. The projections faded, and the room fell silent. Edgar stared down at the tablet, which now glowed faintly in his hand. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a discovery. It was a mission, a purpose. "We have to go," Eleanor said firmly. "This is bigger than us, Edgar. Whatever's on that planet, it could change everything." Edgar nodded slowly, his grip tightening on the tablet. "Then we follow the path." As they turned to leave the vault, the hum grew softer, almost as if the structure itself was acknowledging their decision. Outside, the alien sky stretched endlessly before them, and the massive ship they had seen in the hologram now rested in the distance, waiting for them. Their journey was far from over. It was only beginning. Edgar Blackwood and Dr. Eleanor Vance stood at the base of the alien vessel, its immense structure towering above them like a sentinel. The ship, sleek and angular, shimmered faintly under the twin suns, its etched symbols pulsing softly as if responding to their presence. "This is it," Eleanor whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "This is the vessel they want us to use." Edgar tightened his grip on the tablet. "It's not just a ship. It's a key, a guide, maybe more." The ground vibrated faintly beneath their feet as a ramp extended from the base of the vessel, its surface glowing faintly, inviting them aboard. Edgar felt a pulse from the tablet in his hand, its symbols glowing in rhythm with the ship's lights. Eleanor hesitated, her gaze locked on the open entrance. "Once we step inside, there's no turning back." "There never was," Edgar replied, his voice steady. Without hesitation, he stepped onto the ramp. The ship's hull brightened, the symbols etched into its surface glowing more intensely. Eleanor followed, her breath shallow, her steps careful. Inside, the ship was a marvel of alien design. The walls were smooth and metallic, their surfaces shifting subtly with patterns of light. The air was cool, filled with a faint hum that resonated within their bones. Strange glowing orbs hovered near the ceiling, casting a soft, ambient glow. "It's alive," Eleanor murmured, running her hand along the wall. The surface rippled faintly at her touch, as though acknowledging her presence. Edgar nodded, his gaze fixed ahead. This ship isn't just a vessel. It's connected to everything we've seen. The vault, the archive. It's aware of us. As they ventured deeper into the ship, they reached a central chamber. At its heart stood a pedestal, similar to the one they had seen in the vault. Edgar felt the tablet grow warm in his hand, its symbols shifting rapidly. Without hesitation, he placed it onto the pedestal. The room responded instantly. The walls lit up with cascading patterns of light, and a hologram of the galaxy appeared, spinning slowly. The voice from the vault returned, deep and resonant. "Welcome, observers. The path is prepared." Eleanor stepped closer to the hologram, her eyes wide. This ship, it's more than transportation. It's a bridge between worlds. Edgar stared at the hologram, his mind racing. Why us? What are we supposed to do when we get there? The voice answered cryptically. The archive is incomplete. Restoration requires those who seek. The path must be reclaimed. Eleanor glanced at Edgar, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. It's not random. We were chosen for this. The hologram shifted, zooming in on the planet they had seen before. Its surface was covered in intricate structures, glowing faintly with the same energy that powered the vault. Orbiting the planet were smaller constructs, their designs equally alien and advanced. The vessel will guide, the voice intoned. Departure is imminent. The walls began to hum louder. Edgar and Eleanor exchanged a glance, bracing themselves as the ship lifted off. Through the transparent walls they watched as the alien world beneath them shrank, its surreal landscape fading into the distance. "This is really happening," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. "We're leaving everything behind." Edgar placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Whatever's ahead, we'll face it together." The ship ascended smoothly, the twin suns disappearing behind them as they entered the vast expanse of space. The stars shimmered like diamonds, refracting faintly against the ship's translucent surface. Despite the enormity of the moment, Edgar felt calm. As the ship moved deeper, the hologram shifted again, displaying new pathways and destinations. The voice returned. The path will test. The path will reveal. Prepare. Eleanor frowned. Test? What kind of test? Before Edgar could respond, the lights flickered and the hum deepened. Edgar felt a tension in the air. "We're not alone," he said quietly. The hologram reactivated, projecting a new image. A massive structure loomed ahead, its size dwarfing the vault. Dark and foreboding, its surface absorbed all light. "What is that?" Eleanor asked. The voice returned. "The sentinel. The path is guarded." Edgar stared at the ominous structure, his mind racing. Guarded? By what? And why? The ship slowed as it approached the sentinel, its lights dimming as if in anticipation of something monumental. Edgar felt the tablet in his hand pulse faintly, its symbols shifting rapidly. Whatever lay ahead, it was clear that their journey had become far more dangerous. "We've come too far to stop now," Edgar said. "Whatever's on that planet, we're meant to reach it." Eleanor nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. "Then, let's face it together." As the ship drew closer to the sentinel, the air inside grew heavier, charged with ancient energy. The path ahead was uncertain, but Edgar and Eleanor knew one thing. There was no turning back. The sentinel loomed ahead, an oppressive shadow in the infinite void of space. Its dark, jagged surface absorbed all light, making it appear more like a rift in reality than a structure. Edgar and Eleanor stood in the ship's central chamber, staring at the hologram of the colossal barrier that now filled the room. "It's enormous," Eleanor murmured, her voice tinged with dread. "How do we get past that?" Edgar tightened his grip on the tablet, feeling its warmth pulse through his hand. If the ship brought us here, it must have a way through. We need to trust it." The voice returned, colder and sharper than before. "The sentinel judges. The unworthy shall not pass." The words sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. Judges? What does that mean? The hologram shifted, zooming in on the sentinel's surface. Strange, angular shapes moved across it, their forms flickering like shadows in a storm. The ship slowed, its hum deepening, as if bracing for impact. Suddenly, a surge of energy rippled through the air and the chamber's lights dimmed. "We're being scanned," Edgar said quietly. "It's testing us." A beam of light shot from the sentinel, piercing through the ship's translucent walls and enveloping Edgar and Eleanor in its glow. The air around them grew heavy, charged with an indescribable force. Images began to flood their minds, memories, fears, hopes, and regrets, all laid bare before the sentinel's judgment. Eleanor gasped, clutching her head. "It's inside my mind," she whispered. "It's looking at everything." Edgar staggered but remained focused. "It's trying to understand us, to decide if we're worthy." The light intensified, and the voice returned, resonating in their very bones. "Your intentions are unclear. Your resolve must be proven." As the words echoed, the chamber around them shifted. The smooth metallic walls dissolved, replaced by a swirling expanse of stars and shadows. They were no longer aboard the ship. They stood on an ethereal plane, suspended between dimensions. "What is this?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. "A test," Edgar replied, his tone steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "It wants us to prove ourselves." The stars around them began to coalesce, forming figures, vague humanoid shapes that pulsed with light and energy. They moved toward Edgar and Eleanor, their forms flickering like flames. One stepped forward, its presence overwhelming. "Why do you seek the archive?" it asked, its voice neither male nor female but something beyond comprehension. Edgar hesitated, then spoke. "To understand. To restore what's been lost." "To restore," the figure echoed, "and yet you are bound by fear. Doubt lingers within you." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "We're here because we were called. Whatever lies ahead, we're willing to face it." The figure seemed to consider her words. The others began to circle them, their light intensifying. The voice returned, layered and resonant. "You stand at the threshold of knowledge and ruin. One step forward and the path will open, but only if your resolve is true." The swirling plane grew brighter, the figures dissolving into streams of light. The ship's chamber reformed around them, and the hologram of the sentinel flickered back into view. The ship began to move forward, its lights pulsing in rhythm with the tablet in Edgar's hand. "We're moving," Eleanor said, her voice filled with cautious hope. "Did we pass?" The voice spoke again, softer this time. "The path is open, but the test is not complete." The sentinel's surface began to shift, revealing a massive gateway lined with glowing symbols. As the ship approached, the gateway opened, and a blinding light enveloped them. The hum of the ship grew louder, resonating with the energy of the portal. Edgar gripped the tablet tightly. "This is it. We're crossing over." The ship surged forward, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light, and a deep vibration coursed through the vessel. Then, as suddenly as it began, the motion stopped. The ship emerged on the other side, floating above a planet unlike any they had ever seen. The planet glowed with an inner light, its surface covered in vast, crystalline structures that shimmered like gemstones. Rivers of liquid energy carved glowing pathways across the land, converging at a massive central tower that pulsed with an ancient, otherworldly power. "We made it," Eleanor whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "This is the archive." The ship descended slowly, its lights dimming as it approached the surface. Edgar felt the tablet in his hand grow warm again, its symbols shifting into a new pattern. The voice returned, calm and deliberate. You have reached the vault of origins. The knowledge you seek lies within. But be warned, the answers will change everything. As the ship touched down, the ramp extended once more, and the central chamber's walls shimmered. Edgar and Eleanor stepped forward, their hearts pounding with anticipation and dread. "This is what we came for," Edgar said, his voice steady. "No matter what happens, we'll face it together." Eleanor nodded, gripping his arm. Together. They stepped off the ramp, their feet touching the crystalline ground of the archive. The air was alive with energy, humming faintly as if the planet itself was breathing. The central tower loomed ahead, its light beckoning them forward. The journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun.